Hello, and welcome to this special online gathering on Who is My Neighbor? Washington, Afghanistan, Haiti. My name is Anna Gordon, and I'm the project manager for the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life at Georgetown University. Our initiative is honored to be partnering with the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Washington for this dialogue. Today's gathering is the first in a three-part series on Pope Francis, Young People, and Solidarity, Dialogues on Fratelli Tutti. This gathering and this whole series is special for several reasons. This actually was not our idea. Pope Francis reached out to Cardinal Gregory through the president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. And Pope Francis asked if the Archdiocese would bring together young people in the nation's capital and beyond to discuss some of the ideas and challenges he wrote about in his encyclical letter, Fratelli Tutti, translated Brothers and Sisters All. Almost exactly 1 year ago, on the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, Pope Francis released Fratelli Tutti to the world, a letter devoted to fraternity, solidarity, and social friendship. Our initiative held a dialogue the day after this powerful encyclical was released with a Vatican cardinal, a religious sister, a young activist, and a leading journalist. We're revisiting Fratelli Tutti with our friends at the Archdiocese of Washington because its messages are at the heart of our mission, a call to dialogue, to support and lift up young people of faith, and to work together to address moral and public issues like human life, migration, racism, and climate change. This powerful letter to the world especially called on young people to build a community that supports and helps, in which we can help one another to keep looking ahead, to dream together, to build together. I want to acknowledge as we begin the encouragement and assistance we received from leaders of Scholas Occurrentes and our friends at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Now, I'd like to turn first to Cardinal Wilton Gregory, the Archbishop of Washington. Cardinal Gregory, thank you so much for being here tonight. We have many young leaders, nearly 1,300 RSVPs who are joining us. Can you welcome these young people who are listening in and share why Pope Francis asked us to come together?
Thank you very much, Anna. My dear friends, thank you very much for the time today for this important discussion. It is a privilege for me to be with you. I would like to express my great appreciation to the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life at Georgetown University and Scholas Occurrentes for their hard work and dedication in planning this dialogue. I know that the initiative has supported so many of us with not only numerous useful resources and conversations over the years, but also through friendship. We truly find ourselves in a unique moment in time with humanitarian crises across the world, especially in Afghanistan and Haiti, with the racial reckoning in our own nation and the ongoing coronavirus pandemic that has affected every area of our lives. Our communities locally, nationally, and globally have been greatly impacted, and many of us have felt moved to respond and have wondered about the best ways to reach out and help our neighbors who are suffering. One of the most humbling aspects of the pandemic and during these times of crisis has been the witness of the many young men and women of various faith traditions who are committed to lifting up and working side by side with those in need. Their commitment to advocacy work and dialogue is at the center of this vital outreach to help maintain stability at a time when it is most needed. The moral and social teachings of our faith traditions have been on full display during this pandemic in a powerful way as a tremendous, tangible blessing for so many who do not know how they were going to survive. Today, we are here to respond to Pope Francis's invitation to the young people in the Church of Washington to engage in conversation and dialogue about the most critical social issues of our times. Pope Francis has provided a roadmap for all of us on how to do this with his encyclical letter entitled Fratelli Tutti, on fraternity and social friendship. Fratelli Tutti is a guide for Catholics, people of faith, and all persons of goodwill on the importance of dialogue and relationship or fraternity with one another. Dialogue and relationship, what Pope Francis calls social friendships, are distinct but related theological realities. And those of you young people gathered here this evening, I know, the bedrock of friendship and reaching out to our neighbors is dialogue and relationships. Dialogue is not a one and done conversation. It is a process of discernment, accompaniment, listening, and exchange. Fratelli Tutti intends to help us approach dialogue in a supportive way through the lenses of compassion, integrity, mercy, and the recognition of each person's dignity, because they are made in the image of God. At the heart of Fratelli Tutti is the serious task we all face. We must love our neighbor as ourselves. Let us commit ourselves to having one meaningful dialogue each day with our neighbors in every encounter we have to bring about the common good intended for all. Let us move into the social friendships that exhibit respect and support for one another and strengthen our commitment to God, who is our creator.
Thank you, Cardinal Gregory. I guess when the Holy Father asks you to do something, the answer is always yes.
Yes, quickly.
Thank you. So here's our plan for the rest of this evening. First, we'll discuss the message of the Pope's letter, Fratelli Tutti, and the question, who is my neighbor, with three remarkable leaders. Cardinal Gregory, who is our pastor and archbishop, and was named a cardinal by Pope Francis. He has also served as the president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops in the early 2000s. Juan Aznaran, who works at Catholic Charities here in the Archdiocese of Washington, where he and his colleagues welcome immigrants every day and offer holistic and caring support and services. And Omayma El Ella, who works at Democracy Fund, where she leads efforts to help protect vulnerable communities and has also been involved in Muslim leadership development. Second, we'll look at three examples of where the call to be a neighbor is particularly urgent. We'll hear from three of our other participants. Muzhgan Azizy, who arrived recently in Northern Virginia just this past summer as a refugee from Afghanistan, and will share what led her to have to flee her home and come to the United States. Reynold Hippolyte, who is joining us from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and will share his experience working at Catholic Relief Services with young people in the midst of a devastating hurricane and a political crisis. And finally, Gerald Smith Jr., who is the principal at St. Thomas More Catholic Academy in Washington, D.C., and will talk about how to be a neighbor at a time of racial reckoning in our own community and nation. And finally, there will be a chance for you, our audience, to ask questions of these remarkable leaders. We've already received several, and we invite you to send in your questions as well by using the email at the bottom of your screen. Please also share your thoughts on social media using the hashtag #WhoIsMyNeighbor and by tagging GUCST Public Life and WASH Archdiocese on Twitter. And so with that, let's get started. Cardinal Gregory, I first want to say thank you for your leadership and your pastoral care for the Church in Washington. We're blessed to have you as a pastor who shows us how to be a neighbor every day by standing up for the poor and vulnerable, the unborn and undocumented, welcoming refugees, and resisting racism. Let me first ask you this. Pope Francis places the story of the Good Samaritan as the center of Fratelli Tutti. Time and time again, during his papacy, and especially during this pandemic, Pope Francis has asked us to focus on the question of who is my neighbor? How does he answer that question? And why is this especially important today for young people?
In Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis used the gospel passage of Cain and Abel to have us reflect on Cain's response to God, "Am I my brother's keeper?" How would you answer this question with respect to the most vulnerable? Do you see the immigrant, refugee, disabled, prisoner, and poor as your brother and sister? Concretely, in our communities, we can begin by asking key questions, which begin dialogue. How do we talk about and care for vulnerable people? Do we advocate for citizenship for immigrants and refugees? Do we connect with local organizations to help welcome recently arrived refugees? What do we do for our neighbors locally here in the DMV who experience racism and discrimination every day of their lives? This dialogue is a key step in our work to create a different culture where each one of these people are seen as our brothers and sisters, and where we care for one another because we are all created in God's image and in God's likeness. Listening to our brothers and sisters of different cultural, ethnic, racial, and faith backgrounds can be uncomfortable, or for some, or very different from our own everyday familiarity. However, nothing in our Christian life calls us to comfort. The very act of declaring ourselves as Catholics and as Christians notes we are willing to lead lives that are committed to pursuing love and justice in the name of God. We know that this work, our work, God's work, is not easy.
Thank you for that. We do need to create a different culture, one of listening and one of encounter, like you said. Let me follow up on what you were just talking about. What is Pope Francis calling and hoping for from young people at this time of a pandemic, isolation, national divisions, and global challenges?
And Pope Francis calls all of us, especially our young people, to be creative and to be bold in our prophetic voice. Like the prophets of the Old Testament, young people are called to speak out against falsehoods, to denounce violence in all forms, and to advocate for and with the disadvantaged of our society. The young people in our church are uniquely positioned to participate in civil dialogues and conversations in order to confront polarizing rhetoric, peacefully protest civil injustice, and advocate for love of our neighbors. Fratelli Tutti states, we believers are challenged to return to our sources in order to concentrate on what is essential, worship of God and love for our neighbor. The truth is that violence has no basis in our fundamental religious convictions, but only in their distortions, unquote. What does this look like in our daily lives? Pope Francis reminds us that dialogue calls for perseverance and patience, and he notes that there are moments of silence and suffering. We should spend some time in reflection about the encounters that we have in our everyday lives. If we truly recognize that each person is made in the image and likeness of God, then we must reach out and enter into dialogue and relationship with those who live in poverty or who have special needs and disabilities or whose cultural or national origins are different than our own. We must dialogue with those from other faith traditions. Fratelli Tutti reminds us of why we need to listen and always attempt the honest dialogue we are greatly in need of in our communities, in our church, in our neighborhoods, and in our families.
Thank you, Cardinal Gregory. We do need to listen. And so now let's turn to another one of our panelists and listen to them. Juan, let's talk to you. You and I just met, but you seem to me to live out the gospel message of serving God and neighbor through your life and work at Catholic Charities in Washington. The Newcomer Network, assists immigrants with legal services, as well as social services like housing and healthcare. And this work is needed now more than ever.
Mhm.
What for you is the single most important point for young people that Pope Francis makes in Fratelli Tutti?
So I think for me, it really comes back to a little bit of a personal story, if you will. To me, when Pope Francis speaks about building walls, or rather, taken down walls. Personally, right, my mom and I immigrated from Peru when I was a teen, and I came to this country with very limited English, and my mother was still learning English. And when we came here, we were very blessed to meet people who were so welcoming and people who really met us where we were, which for us made such a huge difference. We came here. Unfortunately, we also saw the other extreme, right? People who really were not as welcoming, people who really told us that if we didn't speak the language, we really had to go back to our country. And I remember as a teen at the time, it was something that really stuck with me, something that to this day stuck with me. And so reading about the taking down those walls felt a little bit like the Pope was speaking to, teenage Juan. And just the idea of sometimes, we build these walls to really separate, to create this divide between them and me. And how us as Christians, right, we should be tearing those walls down. So we're not just talking physically, right, walls, but especially walls in our heart. Right, to really move away from this ideology that it's their problem versus what I have. It's really the invitation for all of us to think of it as a communal thing, right, as an us, and how do we go about it. So I think for me, that is the critical piece of Fratelli Tutti.
Tearing down the walls in our hearts, that's very powerful. Let me ask you another question. Pope Francis calls on us to focus on that question of who is my neighbor with the parable of the Good Samaritan, as we were just talking about with Cardinal Gregory. How do you answer that question, who is my neighbor, in your own life and in your own work? And how can other young people be genuine neighbors today?
That is definitely a loaded question and definitely a work in progress, I would say. But I think for me, it really comes to kind of a recurring theme that I've seen in my life, and especially in my faith life. And it actually starts when, from Cardinal Gregory. When I used to work for the Archdiocese, when Cardinal Gregory first got here, back then, Archbishop Gregory, when he first met us, I remember he called a staff meeting. And one of the first things he said to us was, apologist to us. He said, you probably won't see much of me for the next few months because in order for me to serve this local church, I have to meet the people. A few months went by and it was true. We didn't see Archbishop, now Cardinal Gregory, as much in the office or in the dining room, but we did see him every Sunday visiting different churches, different communities, different schools, many different events throughout the Archdiocese. And to me, that was so impactful because it really showed that to Cardinal, it really was people first, and then that would lead to the ministry. And so now fast forwarding, as you mentioned, my new work now with the Newcomer network at Catholic Charities, it really, as you said, is really focused on us looking at the person in a very holistic way. I have wonderful coworkers and great staff, and all of us from different faiths with really just the goal of empowering newly arrived people to really become part of this community, a really active members of the community. And we realized that in order for us to do that, we can't really hone into one of the issues. We can't just look at immigration status, or we can't just look at one necessity, but we really need to look at them holistically. And that's really what we try to do with our work, and something that I think reminds me a lot of, again, looking at the person first. And now in my personal life, I think I take it a little even further. To me, really, it ties in, seeing the person first to the idea of being pro-life. I would consider myself an active pro-life member. And I think being an advocate, not just for the unborn, but for the immigrant, the refugee, right, the elder, the imprisoned, as Archbishop said, people who've struggled with racism, disabilities, the LGBTQ community, and so on. And so I think really our duty as pro-life people is to be able to look at the issue from a holistic perspective. And finally, just quickly to invite the young adults, I think, for them to answer this call is to really look at the picture overall, right? In order for us to truly love our neighbor, we have to acknowledge all their needs, their goals, and their struggles. And that's the only way that we can really love them as brothers and sisters in Christ.
Thank you for that, Juan. Omayma, you work at Democracy Fund, where, among other things, you support the Just and Inclusive Society Project in its mission to protect vulnerable communities facing racism and hate. You are also a young Muslim woman yourself and have advocated for strengthening Muslim civic engagement as well as interfaith dialogue. In Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis says part of the inspiration for his letter was a dialogue with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmed El-Tayeb, and Pope Francis quotes their joint statement. He says, "In the name of God, we declare the adoption of a culture of dialogue as the path, mutual cooperation as the conduct." What does that message mean to you, and how does your religious tradition answer the question of how we serve our neighbors?
Thank you, Anna. Well, I'll say firstly that that message resonated greatly with me. We can't begin to address our shared challenges as a country, let alone the entire globe, without recognizing the need to work with others outside of our respective groups. We need to seek those spaces where we encounter others. We need to allow our hearts to be open to friendship, and for that friendship to turn into the genuine care and love that we have for ourselves and our families, to be able to stand together in solidarity and address the numerous shared challenges we're facing as a global community. As a Muslim, I grew up with a very strong sense of the concept of obligation towards others in my faith tradition, that people have rights upon us and vice versa, that our wealth is not our own, that we are not just here for ourselves, we are here to serve others. And there are numerous sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, telling us that one is not a true believer if they allow their neighbor to go hungry or harm them in any way or cheat them. And we have many examples of his service and his action in his life showing up for his non-Muslim neighbors when they needed him. There's also this verse in the Quran that I feel very passionate about because it talks about how God deliberately created us into separate tribes and nations so that we may know one another. And what I've taken from that verse is firstly, diversity is intentional and part of God's will. But secondly, we can only know ourselves by knowing others. And part of our faith practice has to be to seek those encounters with people who are different to us and engage with them in good faith and with love. When I was reading Fratelli Tutti, and I know that there's this friendship between the Grand Imam and the Pope, it made me reflect on the importance of friendship with others who are different to you to build community. Because when you have that foundation of friendship, you can more readily build a resilient community and take on the challenges that threaten us collectively. I grew up in Sweden, the child of North African immigrants, and all my friends were non-Muslim. And I'm grateful for those friendships because they challenged us in good ways, particularly to think more deeply about our belief systems and why we believe the things we do. But those friendships also meant that when people would say Islamophobic things to me, I had non-Muslim friends who would stand up for me and even challenge our own family members who had their prejudices. And I would do the same. I remember one time in particular as a teenager, I was with a Swedish friend of mine. We were waiting for the bus, it was late at night, and I had a drunk man yell at me, telling me that my religion oppressed me. And it wasn't lost on me the irony of the fact that he was engaged himself in an oppressive act, but bigots aren't known for being consistent. And in that moment, before I could say anything or respond, she turned to him and yelled at him, telling him that my religion empowered me, which was brilliant because I'd always told her that, and that he didn't know what he was talking about. And if he didn't leave us alone, she would throw her 5-inch platforms in his face. I'm not sanctioning violence, by the way, but I wanted just to use that story to illustrate how in that moment, her solidarity with me meant that I felt safe and meant that I felt like I belonged. And that was so important to me because so often I felt like I didn't growing up in Sweden. And so when I think about the message around strengthening mutual cooperation and dialogue, I think we also need to think about the importance of cultivating friendship to do that more effectively.
That's a beautiful illustration and understanding of what true friendship means. How can people of faith, especially young people of faith that you have worked with and that how can we work across religious lines to advance the common call to love our neighbor?
I would firstly start off by saying to remember that all of our faith traditions make it very clear that faith is not just practiced in ritual and prayer, it's practiced in action and in service to others as well. I remember being in conversation with a friend of mine who's a member of the Swedish church, and we were discussing nationalism and racism, and both contemplating the question of why should people care about one another? And as people of faith, one simple answer is simply to say, because we are commanded to, quite literally by God. But to add nuance to that, we can't say that we are practicing the spiritual tenets of our faith traditions whilst neglecting to care about other lives that God has sanctioned to exist on this earth alongside with us. And that's why it's been so heartbreaking to see members of our own faith communities at times swayed by nationalist, racist, xenophobic narratives that pit us against each other. I think one of the challenges we're seeing in relation to addressing societal ills like racism and toxic polarization is something that Pope Francis actually names in the encyclical, which is radical individualism, amongst many other ills. We have people in our own faith communities indoctrinated as well with this idea that we should only really care about how our own individual actions affect us personally. So for instance, so many people still struggle to understand racism in relation to its structural and systemic place in America, that they can't fathom the idea that they can be racist by supporting policies and norms that uphold racist structures, because their individualized understanding of the world tells them that as long as they don't personally harm an individual with their words or their hands, then that lets them off the hook. And I can share that in Islam, we're taught that entire communities have been held accountable by God for major sins and transgressions. And that's because even if not every single member of that community was directly involved in killing another person or oppressing another human being, them turning a blind eye to that can make them complicit. Them sanctioning that behavior by not calling it out makes them complicit. And so we're taught to never become indifferent to oppression. And that's a muscle you have to exercise because you can become numb. And you do that by getting out of your comfort zone and being curious about others and seeing the ways in which your life is intertwined with theirs. And lastly, I'll just say that to young people of faith, we need to model the best of our faith by seeking out those spaces and people with different backgrounds and learning from them and nurturing trust and friendship with them. Because not only will you grow as a person by doing that, that's the best way to start building and sustaining the movements we need to solve our shared challenges and pursue social justice.
Well, thank you, Cardinal Gregory, Juan, and Omayma, for those challenging and thoughtful reflections on Fratelli Tutti. This is just a quick reminder to send your questions in to the email at the bottom of your screen, cathsocialthought@georgetown.edu, and we'll get to those questions soon. But now we're going to turn to our second segment. We're going to get a little more specific. The call to be better neighbors, to act with solidarity, is tested in particular places and at particular times. We've asked 3 young leaders to offer their own experiences for our reflection and action. Let's begin with Afghanistan and your experiences, Muzhgan. You, your husband, and your 13-year-old son arrived in the United States this past summer as refugees from Afghanistan. Catholic Charities in the Diocese of Arlington have assisted your family as they help so many other immigrants and refugees. For many of us listening in, the news we receive about Afghanistan often does not capture the human dimensions of these crises. Tell us about your family, your home country, and what led you to have to flee Kabul and come to the United States.
Thank you. As mentioned in my introduction, I am from Afghanistan. It's a country located in Central Asia, and that's why sometimes it's called Heart of Asia. And it is a war-torn country. From the time I was born till now, I don't remember a moment of stability and peace in my country. To talk about my family, I am married and I have a 13-year-old son. In Afghanistan, I lived with my parents, husband, and son in Kabul province. I worked with the US Embassy in Kabul when the United States government announced its military withdrawal from Afghanistan. The security situation got worse in all over Afghanistan. Since I worked with the US government, I was eligible for a special immigrant visa. And right at the time when Taliban took over many large provinces in Afghanistan, I got my US visa and I was able to flee the country with my husband and son, leaving behind my parents and siblings.
Thank you for sharing your story, Muzhgan. How has fleeing Afghanistan to come to the United States affected you as a mother, as a wife, as a professional and a worker, as a daughter, as a sister? And how should it affect the rest of us? And what can we do as neighbors to support refugees like yourself?
Of course, the situation in Afghanistan badly affected me. I had to leave my country and come for living in the United States, where I have to start everything from scratch. And I want to thank people of the United States and United States government for giving us a safe place in their country. But I want to say that getting settled in a new country where everything is new requires a lot of struggles, of course, both mentally and physically. So for me as a mom, it was a struggle to register my son to school. And for my son, it's still a struggle to get familiar with the education system and classes set up here. And he still misses some of his classes because he cannot figure out where each of his classes is located in the school building. So, and as a daughter and sister, I am concerned about security of my parents and siblings because I worked with the US mission, and I don't know how and when I will be able to have them in a safe place. And of course, me being new with the lifestyle, with the culture, with the systems here in the US affect my neighbors and people around me. I may do things that do not fit the culture here, or I may do things that are different from what a system's requirements are. But that doesn't mean that I do not respect the culture. That doesn't mean that I do not follow the rules and regulations. It just simply means that I'm unfamiliar and I'm new here. So what I expect from my neighbors and people of this great country is to be patient with us, to support us, to go through this difficult time of resettlement and adjustment. So I believe that being patient and guiding us when we need their guidance can be the biggest support we receive from them.
Thank you, Muzhgan. We're very glad you're here with us tonight and here in our country. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now let's turn to our own hemisphere and the island of Haiti. We're going to Port-au-Prince to hear from Reynold. Reynold, you work for Catholic Relief Services, which does extraordinary work around the world, including in Haiti. That work was especially important following your Prime Minister's assassination in July and the 7.2 magnitude earthquake in August. Every day you encounter young adults in Haiti who are trying to feed, shelter, and live a life of dignity. We've heard the heart-wrenching stories of people struggling to meet those basic needs, and some who want to leave and come to the US through the southern border. Can you tell us what's going on in Haiti right now and the impact it's having on the young people you work with?
Well, thank you so much, Anna. I would like to begin by pointing out that the situation is so alarming that we are living with the feeling that we have hit the bottom. We are facing a political crisis since at least 4 years. These days, we observe an increase in kidnapping. Youth flee the country to Brazil, Mexico, Chile with the hope of being able to take refuge in the USA as soon as the opportunity rises. There is a new trend now where gangs are moving into previously safe, quiet neighborhoods. 90% of young people trained in Asian universities decide to travel abroad. Let's take some time to talk about this. This is one of the major problems that no one is talking about that will further hamper the development of the country. People who don't want or can completely leave the country decide to move their family to Dominican Republic. They earn money in Haiti to spend it elsewhere because of the insecurity. Even Asian small businesses are either relocated to Dominican Republic or opened there by Asians who previously wanted to invest in the country. This leads to capital flight that could have a ripple effect on the country's economy. Neighborhoods now are deserted due to the insecurity issue. So all of this occurring on the heels of the assassination of the president on July 7th and a major earthquake on August 14th, followed by a tropical storm, which passed over the earthquake-affected zone just a few days later. But there's also good news. Haiti is teaming with young, energetic citizens who are anxious to bring positive change to their families, communities, and country. Youth are recognized by their communities for the strength, energy, and flexibility. There are many avenues already available for youth civic engagement, service, and leadership. Asian youth need a helping hand to show them a way that gives access to the opportunities to acquire education, training, life skills development, and to succeed in jobs, careers, self-sufficiency, and adulthood. Unfortunately, the government does not provide this helping hand, so other actors need to step in to fill the gap.
Can you tell us a story about one of those young people? Tell us about someone you've met and how they're bringing that hope and that opportunity to Haiti.
Yeah, thank you. Catholic Relief Services implements a youth program in Haiti. As the head of youth, I have the occasion to exchange with a lot of young people. This makes it possible for me to understand that many youth have lost all hope in the future. Now, much more effort is needed to encourage them to continue in development programs. Yet, there are still some youth who really believe that the change is the sum of individual actions and that they must be part of these agents of change. So I would like to take the occasion to share the voice of one of our project participants to demonstrate what kind of change we can make with youth investment. His name is Luis. He is a member of the first cohort of youth in Teso, community of Haiti, who received a startup grant for his micro enterprise. But before entering the project, he was unemployed, but an active volunteer in his community. So he said to me, since I joined the project in 2017 and studied training on entrepreneurship and life skills, my behavior and attitude have completely changed. In the same year, my house burned down and I lost everything. At the outset, I was desperate, but the training on life skills helped me, and the grant gave me a second chance to start over. Luis became more confident every day as he put into practice what he learned during training sessions. He designed his business plan with coaching from the project team and used the sales grant to start a small business, like catering and facilities. He offered food and facility service for events such as wedding reception, birthday, party, meeting, or training sessions. Since he opened his business, he has become a leader, a model in his community, and he can afford to care of himself and also help people in need. Today, he employs 10 workers, 7 women and 3 men as cook, waitresses, and drivers.
That's a wonderful example of a sign of hope and a sign of solidarity and a sign of answering the question how we can be neighbors to one another. Thank you, Reynold. The challenge of Fratelli Tutti and solidarity is not just global, but also profoundly local. Washington, D.C. is many communities in one. The monuments and the places we rarely see, the rich and powerful and the poor and vulnerable, with enormous gaps that reflect racial, ethnic, and economic injustices. What does it mean to be a neighbor here? We turn now to Gerald. You work every day with young people, and most of them are students of color. In Washington, D.C. and across the United States, there is an overdue and ongoing racial reckoning that is being led by many young Black leaders like yourself. What does it mean to really be a neighbor in Washington at this moment? And how can young people strengthen ties of friendship and solidarity during these challenging times?
Thanks so much, Anna. I think it's very important for us I'm a native Washingtonian, and so I've had the privilege to see the beauty that Washington, D.C. has, a melting pot of different cultures, races, and ethnicities, and how amazing that is. But like any system that perpetuates oppression, that can become a problem, especially when we're looking at Washington, D.C. Consider gentrification, this amazing thing that allows for businesses and new homes and beautiful bridges to be built. But then when we zoom in closer and look at the hidden story, whose voices or perspectives or even their presence is missing within that system? And specifically when we consider African Americans in Washington, DC, they're often pushed to the edges and often overlooked or forgotten. I think what's very important for us to do as neighbors within our nation's capital is to understand that we all must come together standing in that solidarity. But how do we do that? I think the first thing is using our power to build spaces to really truly shift culture, providing that space for relationships to be built, for us to ask those hard questions, for us to be comfortable in sitting in our discomfort, especially when we start to talk about race, to also go to those edges and pull those people that are at those edges to the center so that they can understand that they are valued and are important. I think when we talk about our young children that I get to work with, providing and building spaces for them to interact with people that they often wouldn't. I'll use an example. Last year during COVID, our scholars had the opportunity to work with a school in Northwest, kids that didn't look like them, kids that could speak 3 or 4 languages, and really share their perspective on living in Washington, DC. And for them, one of the big things is just access to transportation, how they are able to move around a lot in Northwest, whereas in Southeast, they can't get places without their parents. So how do we provide spaces for our kids to understand that, one, they can create change, and it is important for us to do that together.
Thank you for that, Gerald. I appreciate your reflections on that. It's very powerful. Those ties of solidarity have been gravely harmed by racial injustice, as you said. How have the deaths of George Floyd, Daunte Wright, Breonna Taylor, and the many, many others killed by police brutality affected you and your students? And how should those deaths move the rest of us if we're called to be neighbors?
As an African-American male, I look in the mirror every day, knowing that I live within a country that can be very complex for a man of color, or for any person of color. I think one of the things that really stood out to me in the encyclical was Pope Francis's line around the right to live with dignity. And that's something that we really push for our kids to understand, or all youth, that they have a right to live, but not just to live in a world that is systemically oppressive, but within a world that they can feel dignified. I think that's important for us to build a sensitivity to systems within our kids to understand that oppression is real, and how to navigate that. For many of my kids, they walk the streets of Southeast DC, which can be very dangerous. And they can become very numb to the violence that exists. But I think it's very important for us to understand that in order for us to feel like we're connected, we have to be aware of things that exist in our country that demoralize or break down particular cultures, specifically African Americans. Pope Francis also talked about what is the meaning of our existence. And I think that's really important for us to zoom into when we talk about people of color in our country, in America. If we exist within this country and all the liberties are there for all of us, are there systems that exist that oppress individuals to not access the American dream? And how are we redefining those systems, dismantling them and rebuilding better ones?
Thank you, Gerald. And thank you, Muzhgan, and thank you, Reynold, for making the challenges of Fratelli Tutti current and concrete. And now we're finally going to turn to questions from our audience. Please send in your questions to the email you see on your screen. We have a few more minutes left here, and we're going to try and get to as many of them as possible. This first question is on interfaith dialogue. This week, the Pope gathered interfaith leaders to dialogue and take action on a common good, which is caring for creation and caring for our natural environment. This person who wrote in says, we often don't see interfaith dialogue in our local Catholic communities and other faith communities as well. How can we encourage our local priests and church leaders to reach out to dialogue and work together with other faith leaders for the greater good of our communities? Cardinal Gregory, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Anna. I think the challenge of bringing men and women of various faith traditions has long been a great challenge. It has it's offered a possibility when there are crises. For example, we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and it was a moment when people across our nation decided to come together because of the great experience of fear and horror that that event brought. It caused people to decide that religious differences were not as significant as human encounter and human solidarity. So you saw people of Christian, Islamic, Jewish, and many other religious heritages saying, let's not talk about what distinguishes us. Let's talk about what we share in common in the face of this particular crisis. I think the same situation has happened with the pandemic. It's sad, but it's true. Sometimes the painful moments are the most fruitful.
Thank you for that. Juan, I wonder if you want to respond. Any thoughts on interfaith dialogue?
Sorry, I was muted there. But I think, especially I think as young adults, we I think as I believe Gerald alluded to, we've come I would say a long way. And when it comes to interfaith dialogue, I think there was a time where we felt like that those conversations weren't as organic, or they kind of felt a little forced. And so I think I would encourage, I would say, just kind of, as we said, having those conversations in an open manner. I think Omayma also alluded to, honestly, being, kind of seeking or being more intentional about having friends of other faith cultures, right? And kind of having those conversations starting at home, and really having a space that feels safe where you can really share and learn more about your own faith, but also their perspectives. I think in really having that space to be honest with one another is where we can grow most. So
thank you for that. Let me turn to another question we have here about welcoming migrants and immigrants. This question comes from Jay in Bethesda. How can we more effectively counteract the nationalist notion that all migrants coming to the US are anti-American and harming our society and values? And another related question, what are local volunteer or service opportunities to support immigrants or refugees? Muzhgan, I wonder if you could help us answer that first question. What would you say to the stereotype that all refugees and immigrants are coming to the United States with anti-American values and are imposing their own values on others?
Well, I think that that's not true about all immigrants. If they are against the US or the culture or the religion, they wouldn't seek asylum in this country. Recently, yes, of course, there are many Afghan refugees coming to the US. And most of them are the ones who work with the US government, who work for the US mission. Yes, many of them are people who didn't have access to the basic needs back in home. So they might not be very much civilized, or they might not be familiar with things that they see in the US. But that in no way means that they are against the society or American culture, or in general, all Americans.
Thank you. Reynold, I wonder if you could help us respond to that. You see so many Haitians every day who don't want to leave Haiti, but are forced to. Tell us about the migrants that you meet and why they're coming to the United States. Sorry, you're still muted.
Thank you, Anna. I think what I have just explained could help to understand why they wanted to come to the US. So we are facing many problems here in Haiti. And also now, as I said before, we can observe an increase in kidnapping. So people, and most of them are young, decide to go to Chile, to Brazil, Mexico, by hoping that they could go to the US. So, but there's one thing that I want to say about that. Sometimes maybe we don't really make the difference between immigrants and refugees. For instance, the last thing we see in Texas, those people, Asian people, were refugees. They are not really immigrants. So they decide to leave the country because they cannot find jobs. Some of them are young. They cannot afford paying for universities. They are facing a lot of problems, so they have no choice. So they decide to live anywhere, but not Haiti. That doesn't mean that they don't love Haiti. They do love Haiti, but they are really interested in finding something better than what the Asian government gives them now. Over.
Thank you, Reynold. Omayma, let's bring this next question to you. How can religious communities stand in solidarity with people who are facing racism, injustice, isolation?
It's such a big question. There's so many things we can be doing. I would say, starting off, firstly, educate yourself. I think that's something that's so important. Actually understand, what are these issues? Where are they stemming from? Learn to seek out sources of information that aren't just within your own little bubble. Hear from the people who are actually affected. I remember growing up oftentimes being frustrated about hearing about, let's say, racism or Islamophobia, or a refugee crisis that was happening in the world, and hearing from people who weren't directly affected by it, being very opinionated about what was going on and what needs to be done. I think it's so important to always remember to center those who are directly affected by these issues and listen to them and let them lead. Learn to cultivate that humility to let those individuals lead, listen to them, and hear them out when they're telling you what their needs are, and do what you can. It's not about doing everything. You don't need to be an activist on the street, or at a pulpit or whatever. Do even the smallest acts of kindness and just showing up for people makes such a difference.
Thanks, Omayma. Gerald, let me come to you next with this question from our audience. On social media, it's so easy to believe there are more bad people than there are good. However, despite this temptation to have this pessimistic view, the person writing in believes that there are more good people than social media lets on, but it brings out the worst in us. These platforms bring out the worst in us. What do you think we should do to help prevent people abusing social media, which is deliberately tempting us to start conflict?
Social media is a gift and a curse. And as a middle school educator and elementary school principal, I see that every day with my scholars. I think it's important for us to understand that the bad voices that are out there will simply be silenced if those good voices step up more and speak out, not just against hate, but also spreading that love and joy. As humans, we tend to keep our joy to ourselves a lot. And I think that in this time, more than anything, we need to hear that joy. So we challenge our kids to spread those positive things on social media, but also to charge ourselves to do the same thing too. The followers that I have on Instagram, the people that I follow, I'm always looking for that joy, and the algorithm does its thing behind the scenes and builds this whole plethora of people that I'm connected with across the world. So I think that if we just look a little harder and closer, we can find that joy that's out there, and just making sure that we are intentionally putting out there in that social media space those good things as well.
Cardinal Gregory, let me ask this last question from our audience to you, and then we'll turn to our closing comment. You just returned from Rome, and our colleague Kim Daniels left this evening to go to Rome herself to be a part of the launch of the Synod on Synodality. This coming weekend, Pope Francis will launch this synod, a worldwide 2-year listening process for the church. Is this conversation we're having here today a dialogue with young people about how to live out the gospel an example of synodality that Pope Francis is calling us to? And what else can young people do to be a part of this ongoing conversation of synodality?
Well, first of all, Anna, I do believe it is a wonderful reflection of what the Holy Father hopes that the Synod will be able to engender. That is an atmosphere of listening. In all of the comments that the panelists have made, I think there's been a spirit of wanting to understand and wanting to hear the stories of hope, of struggle, of resilience that have been shared among the panelists. The Synod, as the Holy Father has envisioned, is a time when we can talk to each other, but more importantly, hear each other. Listening is an active human action, and it means more than just allowing the ear to take into sound. It involves the heart to understand and to desire to understand the other person.
We need to listen with our ears and with our heart. That's exactly right. As we come to the end of our dialogue this evening, I want to ask each of you for a brief closing comment. What is one thing the young adults listening to this dialogue can do to practice what Pope Francis preaches and teaches to be better neighbors? Send us off with an action step. Reynold, let's start with you. What's one thing people listening can do to answer the question, who is my neighbor?
I think in every action you undertake, remember that we, the people living in other countries, are your neighbors. Through your actions, your love and compassion, you can easily through your actions, your love and compassion can easily transcend the barriers of geography and distance. By acting like this, you will demonstrate the essence of the fraternal openness that allows us to acknowledge, appreciate, and love each person. We got this of physical proximity. We got this of where he or she was born or lives. This is what the Pope Francis preaches. Also, remember to search for and learn 10 positive things about Haiti. Over.
That's a great action step. Omayma, how about you?
I would say practice being curious and not judgmental. Practice being okay with being uncomfortable. Our faith traditions don't teach us that our spiritual journeys and growth are supposed to be comfortable experiences. So don't let the fear of being challenged stop you from learning from others and seeking friendship with those whose belief systems may differ doctrinally. I'll lastly just share that some of the spaces I have felt the safest in, the most understood, and been the most spiritually inspired in have actually been in inter and multi-faith spaces. So seek those out.
Juan, how about you? What's an action step those watching can take?
I'll say, don't be afraid to share your gifts, and especially don't be, kind of get overwhelmed by the thought that there's so much going on around us, as we said, and across the hemispheres, really. But, even it really starts at your local community or your local church, whether it's volunteering your time at a church or Catholic Charities or Catholic Relief Services, or even volunteering your job, whatever your gifts may be, to really just offer that, in solidarity to your neighbor, to really achieve solidarity, like Pope Francis put it, not as just sporadic generosity, but rather to really become this thought of all of us as a community and how we can help each other in that.
Muzhgan?
So I want to ask young adults for patience and acceptance, and to be grateful for everything that they have and for everything that their country offers them. There are people out there who don't have access to education, to freedom, and even to basic human rights.
Gerald, let's go to you next.
Just a reminder that we're co-responsible to build a more just and humane society. So leave your comfort and go to the edges of the circle without a savior mindset, but with a heart willing to serve and a mind willing to learn.
And finally, Cardinal Gregory.
Anna, each one of us can seek to engage with our neighbors daily. It could be as simple as calling an elderly neighbor whom we haven't seen for a while, stopping to talk to someone on the street who looks like they might be in need, or engaging in work with an organization that helps our neighbors who have come from Afghanistan, Haiti, or other locations. We must be ready to engage our neighbor each day to truly learn about their struggles and their needs, and then to accompany them.
Accompaniment, who is my neighbor, building bridges, hope, dreaming, all the center of this dialogue. Thank you. This hour is over, but the conversation will continue as the Archdiocese of Washington and our initiative host our next two conversations in this special series on Pope Francis, Young People in Solidarity, Dialogues on Fratelli Tutti. Join us Thursday, November 4th, for a discussion on care for our common home and the throwaway culture, and on Thursday, December 2nd, for a discussion on the role of social media in a divided society. I just quickly want to say we've heard about some incredible organizations this evening. On our website and the event page for this dialogue, we do have direct links to support the work of Catholic Relief Services work in Haiti, as well as the work of Catholic Charities in Arlington and Catholic Charities in Washington. So you can find that by going to the resources page on our website. We want to thank in a special way the leaders of Scholas Occurrentes and our friends at the USCCB who have encouraged, assisted, and inspired us in this outreach to young people. They are great examples of Fratelli Tutti in action. Thanks to all who helped on the technical end of this dialogue. And I want to offer special thanks to Molly Herrera, Janine Marino, and Father Charles Courtnovis from the Archdiocese of Washington, and my own colleagues, John Carr and Kim Daniels at the initiative, for their efforts to put this terrific conversation together. Just a reminder that this discussion has been recorded and will be posted on our website and social media channels for sharing, and you can also see follow-up resources from the conversation posted there too. Finally, please join me in thanking these amazing leaders who have informed and inspired us tonight. Muzhgan Azizy, Juan Aznaran, Omayma El Ella, Reynold Hippolyte, Gerald Smith Jr., and Cardinal Wilton Gregory. Thank you, and we'll see you on November 4th.
God bless.